The universe has something important to tell you today. These aren't vague predictions or generic hopes, but a clear, targeted reminder that speaks directly to what you feel inside. It may seem like everything around you is moving away, but there is a message insistently trying to get closer. If you are willing to listen with your heart, you may be able to see what until now seemed hidden. The universe does not make mistakes in addressing. Absence does not always mean disinterest. Sometimes it's just the break needed for something bigger to happen. There is a connection between two people at this moment, perhaps yours and the one who insists on remaining in your thoughts, who is going through a kind of pause. Not a definitive break, but a separation that was not born by chance. The universe is acting silently, creating space for both of you to focus on something beyond what the eyes can see. This separation carries purpose. There is an urgency behind time and an importance that has not yet been rationally understood. The universe moves in lines that escape direct logic and, therefore, communication between you and this person may be happening in a subtle, symbolic, even energetic way. And the most curious thing is that these signs are not being sought. They just happen, they arrive when you least expect it, and yet they manage to stop you for a few seconds, as if they had something to say. For some people, these messages appear in dreams, in numerical repetitions, or in small everyday gestures that carry a symbolic charge that is impossible to ignore. For others, the signs appear more directly, almost blatantly, as if the universe were using every possible means to be noticed. Each person receives what they are able to understand. You may not have even asked for these answers. You may have lost focus, been busy with daily tasks, tried to put this story on the back burner, but something inside you still wants to know what the other person is feeling. What led to this separation? What decisions were made in silence? The truth is that even if you try to distance yourself, you are still energetically connected, and the universe knows it. Often, this person has also come across signs that they cannot ignore. And unlike you, who are perhaps more open to nuance, she seems to need more obvious signs, almost as if she needs to be woken up to what's going on. This happens because each person has their own channel of perception, and the universe respects that. Instead of trying to make you interpret things in the same way, he gives each of you the message that will be most easily recognized. There is an invisible force creating bridges between you, even while it seems like everything is falling apart. This force does not come to confuse, but to remind us that there is something there that has not been ended, only interrupted. There is a sacredness to this connection, a sense that something greater is trying to manifest itself through it. And so the universe keeps insisting on delivering messages, even when you are busy trying not to feel them. Perhaps there are misunderstandings that have been going on for a long time. Stories told in different ways. You may be surprised to discover that the way this person understands what you experienced is completely different from yours. This creates a distance that is not just about space or time, but about perspective. And this difference needs to be recognized so that something new can be born. And even with all this, there is one thing in common. The emotion that still circulates, the care that still exists, the desire, even if silent, to know if there is still time. This energy that circulates between you is being noticed, and the universe will not ignore it. There are times when you just stop. Sometimes it's a song that plays out of nowhere, a sentence in the middle of a book, a coincidence that seems too absurd to be just chance. And then the question arises, does this have anything to do with that person? The universe has its own ways of communicating, especially when the mind is too busy to listen directly. And it is in these moments when you are distracted or even trying to protect yourself, that he insists the most. There is no need to obsessively search for answers, because they almost always come in between. While you wash the dishes, cross the street or think about anything else. It is in these moments when the mind relaxes that the universe finds a channel to deliver the message, and it comes. It could be a thought that comes out of nowhere, a recurring dream, or a strange feeling that makes you look up at the sky without knowing exactly why. But it arrives. The same thing happens with this other person, only in their case, the signs need to be more evident, perhaps out of habit, personality, or even defense. This is someone who doesn't pay much attention to details, but when faced with something too strong to ignore, they are forced to stop. The universe doesn't force, but insists, and over time it creates situations that take this person out of automatic mode, things that make them reflect, sometimes even take a step back, rethink attitudes, review memories. It may be that at this very moment, you are living in very different realities. One of you may be more committed to finding balance and personal healing, while the other is still struggling to understand what they are feeling. This doesn't mean that you are in opposite directions. It just means that everyone has their own rhythm, and the universe works with both of them simultaneously. It doesn't choose sides, it doesn't reward those who feel more or judge those who hesitate. It just silently aligns what can still flourish. Maybe the reason you haven't met again yet is exactly that, time. Not time as a stopwatch, but as transformation. Because it's not just about getting back to talking or rehashing something old. It's about creating something new from truer versions of who you are today. There is an energy of preparation happening, and even if you haven't noticed, it has already begun to transform you. You started to think differently, feel differently, and look at this story with different eyes. And even if there is still doubt, fear, or resistance, there is also a starting point, a greater willingness to understand the other, without expecting them to fit into your way of seeing the world. The universe knows this, and that's why it keeps sending you signs, not to confuse you, but to remind you that something bigger is at work. Even if you are standing still, even if it seems like nothing is happening, there is something being sown behind it. And that's why every now and then you feel that inexplicable sensation that everything is connected, that there is an invisible thread tying together points that have not yet touched again. This connection has value even in silence. And you feel, even when there are no words, even when there are no answers, the feeling is there, persistent, silent, alive. And the other person feels it too, even if they fight against it, because it's not just about physical presence, it's about a frequency, and you're still on it. The way each of you sees this connection can be completely different, and this is more common than it seems. Sometimes, the same story is experienced by two people in such different ways that it would be impossible at first to recognize that it is the same experience. And maybe that's exactly what's happening now. A part of you believes that everything was clear, honest, and direct. The other party, which is the person in question, may have interpreted the events through lenses that you are unaware of. This mismatch of interpretations may have created the noises that today sound like distance, but it doesn't mean that feelings don't exist. Quite the contrary, they remain there, simply disguised as silence. There is a deeper layer to this story that perhaps has not yet been accessed. And by all indications, the universe is trying to show us exactly that. The truth is not always what it seems. And there is more at stake than what was said or left unsaid. What makes everything more delicate is that this truth has to do with fear. Fear of feeling too much, fear of not measuring up, fear of being hurt again. And these fears are silent, but they shape decisions, behaviors, and absences. Maybe that's why this person didn't reach out to you the way you expected. Maybe that's why you, even though you feel so much, have withdrawn. What appears to be indecision is often just self-protection. And even with all these fears at play, there is a very strong energy of reunion in the air, a kind of internal impulse that pushes the two of you towards some kind of reconnection, not necessarily physical or immediate, but energetic, that kind of closeness that happens first inside before any words are spoken. The universe has insisted on this approach because it recognizes something that perhaps you yourselves have not yet assumed. This connection has the potential for transformation, not just as a romantic relationship, but as a catalyst for growth, healing, and emotional maturity. When two people meet at such a sensitive point in their lives, everything that is unresolved comes to the surface. And that can be scary, but it can also be liberating. This connection didn't come to repeat old patterns, it came to break them, and so it demands courage. Courage to recognize that love exists, even when everything seems to say otherwise. Courage to admit that there are real feelings, even if they are not reciprocated in the expected way. Above all, courage to look inside and realize how much this experience is changing you. You may have felt that you were not valued as you deserved, that your attempts were ignored, that your affection went unanswered. But what you may not know is that this person was also fighting an internal battle, and that much of what was left unsaid had more to do with them than with you. Sometimes the other person's silence is not contempt, it is confusion, it is emotional overload, it is the time they need to understand themselves before approaching again. There is an understated beauty in all of this, because even in the midst of miscommunication, distance, and unresolved feelings, you continue to be touched by something that cannot be explained with logic alone, something that remains present even when you both try to move on. That's why the universe keeps insisting, why this story still pulses. There comes a time when something inside us changes, even if everything looks the same on the outside. And that's exactly what the universe is waiting for, that moment when perception changes place and a new understanding begins to emerge. You may be approaching that point, and so is the other person. But, like almost everything between you, this process is experienced at different paces, in different silences. The connection continues to exist even when there is no contact. And what begins to emerge now is an energy of maturation, not the kind of maturity that simply comes with time, but the kind that is born from the pain of recognizing one's own blocks. The person you have feelings for is beginning to see things more clearly, not because someone forced them to, but because the universe is using everything around them to reveal what has always been there, waiting to be recognized. This awareness isn't quick, it's confusing, uncomfortable, full of comings and goings, but it is happening. Doubt is being exchanged for reflection, resistance for curiosity, denial for more attentive silence. It's as if this person is beginning to hear for the first time what you've been feeling for a long time, and you've also changed a lot more than you imagine. Even without realizing it, you stopped seeking validation in external gestures and started listening to what is being said energetically. The connection between you is reconfiguring itself, moving from the surface to the essentials. And this doesn't depend on physical presence or explicit statements, it only depends on the willingness to feel. In this new stage, the universe begins to work with you in a more direct way. And everything that seemed impossible begins to take on subtle forms, small proofs that there is still something to be experienced, a message that comes out of nowhere, a dream that seems more real than it should, an insistent thought in the middle of the night, signs that don't force anything, but open space for reflection. The question now is no longer whether you will meet again, but how this reunion will be, because you are no longer the same people. The previous versions no longer exist. What remains is what was true and what still has the strength to flourish. This reconnection is not about starting over from where you left off, it is about starting something new based on what you were able to learn during this time apart. It is a chance to do things differently, to choose more consciously, to love more truly. And for this to happen, the universe is asking one thing from each of you: surrender. Not in the sense of surrendering to anything, but of trusting the process, of allowing the connection to happen as it should, without forcing it, of making room for the truth, even if it scares you, of accepting that the other person is also on a path and that this path can indeed lead back to you. This surrender requires courage, but it also brings lightness, because you no longer need to control anything, you just need to be present, attentive, available to listen to what has not yet been said and sensitive enough to recognize when it is time to act or just feel. The universe is guiding everything and is doing so with a very clear objective: to bring this story back to a place of truth, without masks, without fanciful expectations, just the essence of what really exists between you. The connection is alive, and the time to rewrite it is approaching.